My life has always been about sacrifices and dedication, ever since I can remember. I was born into a simple family in Recife. I moved to Sao Paulo when I was young and married Antonio, a hard-working man who gave me 3 children and a lot of love. When he passed away from a heart attack, I was only 38, with 3 kids to raise and a mountain of bills to pay. At that time, I didn't have the chance to cry properly. Life doesn't wait for a widow's tears. My name is Olivia, I'm 68 today, and for 3 decades, I devoted myself entirely to being a mother, a provider, and a safe harbor for my children. I worked as a seamstress, first at home, then in a factory in BRZ. Eventually, I managed to set up my own repair shop in the back of the house, which I bought after 15 years of renting. My fingers bear permanent calluses from holding needles and scissors. My back carries the weight of thousands of hours hunched over fabrics, making hems, adjustments, and repairs that seemed small to clients but added up to pay for my children's education. Cecilia, the oldest, has always been studious and responsible. She graduated in nursing and now works in Florianopolis. We call each week, and she always asks if I need anything. Jose, the middle one, ironically returned to Recife, my hometown, married a girl from there, and gave me 2 grandkids I only know through photos and video calls. And then there's Mauricio, the youngest. Mauricio has always been my soft spot, the one most like his father, both in looks and in the way he talks. Since he was little, he knew how to convince me of anything with that crooked smile that melted my mother's heart. It was for them that I saved every possible penny over the years. While my friends went to the hairdresser, I cut my own hair. While other ladies my age took little trips, I saved money for emergencies. My only extravagance was tending to a small garden in the front yard with yellow roses that reminded me of my childhood in Recife, where my mother had a similar garden. When I finally paid off the house in the BOM Retiro neighborhood, a simple but cozy place with 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and my beloved workshop in the back, I felt for the first time in my life that I had truly achieved something of my own. No one could take that away from me. It was my little corner of peace for the old age that was approaching, the place where I could finally rest after a lifetime of work. On Sunday mornings, I enjoyed having coffee on the porch, watching the street bustle, greeting neighbors as they passed by. Mr. Gomez, the owner of the corner store, always brought me the freshest fruits and stopped for a quick chat. Mrs. Jurema, my neighbor for 15 years, would come over for coffee on Wednesdays. We were like sisters, even though we didn't share the same blood. She always said I was too soft with my kids, especially with Mauricio. "Olivia, you need to learn to say no," she would repeat. I would smile and change the subject. Life flowed peacefully until that Tuesday in March. I was sewing the communion dress for Mrs. Carmen's granddaughter when I heard the sound of the gate. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I would recognize those hurried footsteps anywhere. Mauricio walked in without knocking, just like he always did. He brought that lively energy that filled any room. "Mom, are you home?" He shouted from the living room as if the house were too big for him to find me easily. "In the studio, son," I replied, carefully putting away the pins to avoid pricking myself when he came to hug me. But the hug didn't come. Mauricio appeared in the studio door wearing a blue dress shirt and jeans. He had that look I knew well, the look of someone who had already made a decision and was just communicating it, not consulting. "Mom, I have some news," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "We decided to move here." I stayed seated, the needle frozen in the air, trying to process what I had just heard. "Move here?" "Here's the thing." He continued gesturing excitedly, as if he were explaining the brightest plan in the world. "The apartment we're renting has gotten too small. Miguel is already 7, Isabella too. They need more space. And Fernanda's mom, Dona Iracema, has knee problems. She needs someone to take care of her. So, we're combining the useful with the pleasant." "Mauricio," I tried to interrupt, but he was too excited to notice my hesitation. "Your house has 2 bedrooms, you only use one. The other can be for the kids. Fernanda and I will sleep in the living room on that sofa that turns into a bed." Donna Irasima can stay in your room with you. It's not very big, but we can fit 2 twin beds instead of your queen. My heart raced. The idea of sharing my room, my most intimate space, with a woman I barely knew made me dizzy. And my studio? I asked, looking around the small room where I spent most of my days. Oh, this? He shrugged, as if he were talking about an old closet, not the space that guaranteed my financial independence. We'll reorganize, put your sewing things in a corner of the living room. You don't work that much anymore, right, Mom? You're at the age to rest. Rest. As if I could rest with 2 kids running around the house, a daughter-in-law organizing my kitchen her way, an elderly woman sharing my room, and my son taking over my living room. As if rest meant living surrounded by people, invading every inch of the space I fought so hard to claim. Son, this is a huge decision. We need to talk more about it. Everything is already decided, Mom. He interrupted me with that tone that didn't allow for disagreement. We've already given notice at the apartment. We have to be out by Saturday. I've already hired the moving truck. Saturday. This Saturday. I felt the blood drain from my face. But that's in a few days. Mauricio checked his watch as if he had more important commitments. Exactly, that's why I came to let you know early. Fernanda is already packing everything. We'll be there early, around 8 in the morning. Oh, and we need to take apart your sewing machine to make space. I fell silent, too stunned to respond. He took my silence as agreement, as he always did. I knew I could count on you, Mom, he said, finally coming closer for a quick kiss on my forehead. You're the best, always available to help the family. Now I have to go. I have a meeting. Fernanda will call you to arrange the details. And so, in less than 10 minutes, my son had decided the future of my life without even asking if I agreed, as if I were just a detail in his grand plans, as if my opinion didn't matter. As if my home, my space, my privacy were bargaining chips he could use whenever he needed. When the front door slammed, I remained seated, staring into nothingness. The first communion dress forgotten in my lap. Anger, a feeling I rarely allowed to take over, began to rise in my chest like a warm wave. It wasn't just indignation, it was a silent revolution starting within me. It was in that moment, at 68 years old, that I realized a painful truth. Throughout my life, I had confused motherly love with subservience. I believed that loving meant always giving in, that my role was to solve my children's problems at any cost. But there, in that moment of crystal clarity, I understood that I had raised a son who didn't respect me as a person, who only saw me as a resource available to him. I looked at my calloused hands, at the studio I had built with so much sacrifice, at the photos on the wall that told the story of my life, and a certainty formed within me. Not this time, not anymore. I slowly stood up, carefully put away the dress, and walked to the phone. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed Jerima's number. When she answered, my voice was different, firmer than it had ever been. Jerima? It's Olivia. I need your urgent help. My son just announced he's moving into my house with the whole family. They're arriving on Saturday. I paused, taking a deep breath. And when they arrive, I want to have something prepared that they will remember for the rest of their lives. When my son left that day, I didn't cry. For the first time, I felt a clarity I had never experienced. A strange tranquility washed over me, as if all the frustrations of decades were finally forming a purpose. I looked out the window of my studio and saw Mauricio getting into the car, animatedly talking on his cell phone, probably telling Fernanda how his mother had accepted the move without any issues. As always, I waited for the car to turn the corner and went straight to the phone. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a determination I had never felt before. I dialed the number I knew by heart. Jerima, it's Olivia. I need your urgent help. My friend arrived in 20 minutes. Jerima had always been my opposite, determined, independent, never married, nor had children. At 70, she had an energy that made anyone in their 30s seem tired. When I explained the situation, she showed no surprise. "Olivia, you finally woke up. I thought you'd die being that boy's doormat." Her harsh words struck me, but they didn't offend me. It was the raw truth I needed to hear. "It's not just that, Jerima," I confessed, pouring coffee for both of us. "There's something I've never told anyone." I opened the drawer of the living room dresser and took out an old folder, the kind with an elastic band that I had kept hidden for years. Inside were bank statements, copies of documents, and a few letters. 2 years ago, I discovered something strange in my bank statement. A payroll loan I never took out. I went to the bank to complain, thinking it was a mistake. When they showed me the contract, I recognized the signature immediately. Jerima took the paper and examined it. "This isn't your handwriting, no. But it's a very good imitation of my signature, made by someone who has seen me sign papers my whole life." Jerima's eyes widened, understanding immediately. I nodded to Mauricio, the bitter taste rising in my throat. I later found out it wasn't just once. For years, he used my name to get loans, open accounts, finance that new car. "And you never did anything, never confronted him?" Jerima looked incredulous. "I confronted him once. He cried, apologized, said he was having financial problems, that he would pay everything back." I sighed, remembering that day. I believed him, wanted to believe, but 6 months later I found another loan. Jerima took my hands in hers. Her fingers were warm, while mine felt like ice. "But why are you telling me this now, Olivia?" "Because I think I understand the real reason for this sudden change." I took another paper from the most recent folder. "This is a notice of auction for the apartment where they live. It's not that it got small. They're being evicted for non-payment." Jerima let slip a curse I had never heard before. "And they're going to move here without telling you the truth, using the kids and the mother-in-law as an excuse." "Exactly. And there's more." I showed another document. "I found this paper in his suit pocket when I washed it for my nephew's wedding. It's a consultation with a broker about the value of my house on the market." The silence that followed was deafening. Jerima immediately understood what I had only managed to admit to myself that morning. My son didn't just want a place to live. He wanted to take possession of my house. "My lawyer husband needs to see this," Jerima said. "Finally, can Gomez help you?" She frowned in confusion. "The owner of the grocery store?" Jerima smiled, a smile that had something mysterious about it. "Olivia, do you really think a simple grocery store owner has that whole library at home?" Gomez was one of the most respected lawyers in Sao Paulo, specializing in family law and elder protection. He only opened the grocery store after he retired because he couldn't sit still. That was a revelation to me. Mr. Gomez, the friendly man who brought me the best mangoes, who always asked about my health, who sometimes stopped to have coffee with me on Sunday mornings. He was a renowned lawyer. Why didn't he ever tell me? For the same reason you hid that folder for years, some truths are hard to share. Jerima stood up determined. "I'm calling him now, and I'm also going to call your daughter Cecilia. She needs to know what's going on. I don't want to worry her. She has her own life." I protested more out of habit than conviction. Jerima looked at me with a mix of affection and exasperation. "That's your problem, Olivia. Always thinking you're bothering someone when you ask for help. Cecilia is your daughter. She has the right to know what her brother is doing." While Jerima made the calls, I sat at the kitchen table, looking at the calendar on the wall. Tuesday. That gave me 4 days until Saturday. 4 days to prepare my defense, or rather, my counterattack. Mr. Gomez arrived an hour later, bringing a folder of documents and a serious expression I had never seen on the usually cheerful face of the grocer. He listened to my story in silence, occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he took off his glasses and carefully cleaned them before speaking. "Mrs. Olivia, what your son did is a crime, document forgery, fraud, misuse of personal data. He could face several years in prison for this." My heart sank. Despite everything, the thought of seeing my son in jail caused me physical pain. I don't want him to be imprisoned, Mr. Gomez. I just want my home and my peace. I understand. And there's a way we can achieve that without involving the police right away. He opened his briefcase and pulled out some forms. Let's start by preparing a cease and desist notice. Then we need to protect your assets. As we discussed legal measures, I heard the front door open. Cecilia burst in like a whirlwind, her face red from crying and running at the same time. Mom. She hugged me tightly, as if trying to shield me from the whole world. I took the first flight after Jarima called me. How are you? I felt the tears finally come. Not from sadness or fear, but from relief at not being alone in this battle. I'm fine, sweetheart. Better now that you're here. We spent the rest of the day and part of the night planning. Mr. Gomez, or Dr. Roberto Gomez, as I discovered his full name was, explained that we could use evidence of the fraudulent loans as leverage, without necessarily starting a criminal case. Cecilia, with her nursing experience, suggested we document any signs of financial abuse against the elderly, something Dr. Gomez confirmed the judicial system takes very seriously. But ideally, he said, we should catch your son and family by surprise. If they know you've figured everything out, they might try another plan. Let them think they've won, Jarima added, with a nearly wicked smile before pulling the rug out from under them. That's when I had an idea so bold, so different from anything I had ever thought of doing, that for a moment I hesitated to share it. But then I looked around at my daughter, my best friend, the renowned lawyer disguised as a grocer, and realized I had a support network I had never counted on. What if we do more than just stop them? I asked, feeling a new confidence grow within me. What if we give them exactly what they deserve? The next morning, we began to execute the plan. Cecilia pretended to return to Florianopolis, but she actually stayed at Jarima's house. Dr. Gomez contacted an old colleague who worked as a notary to prepare some special documents. And I, for the first time in my life, began to act like the protagonist of my own story, not just a supporting character in others' lives. On Wednesday, I received a call from Fernanda, my daughter-in-law. Her voice sounded anxious, almost frantic. Mrs. Olivia, Mauricio told me he's already spoken to you about our move. I wanted to thank you for having us. I know it will be an adjustment for everyone. I took a deep breath before responding, keeping the calm and submissive tone she expected to hear. Of course, Fernanda. Family is for times like these, isn't it? Yes, yes. She replied, clearly relieved. I was thinking about some changes for when we arrive. That old sewing machine of yours takes up a lot of space, and while she talked about how she would reorganize my house, I kept a pleasant tone, agreeing with everything. When we hung up, I realized my nails had left marks on my palms from how tightly I had clenched my fists during the conversation. That same afternoon, Dr. Gomez brought a young lawyer to my studio. This is Dr. Teresa, a specialist in elder rights and host of the show Elders at Risk on Community TV. Teresa explained that the program was created specifically to expose and combat cases of abuse against elderly people, especially those committed by family members. It's more common than you might think, Mrs. Olivia. And the more we expose these cases, the more people will feel encouraged to report them. The idea of sharing my story publicly scared me. I've always been reserved, discreet. But then I remembered Mauricio's expression when he announced he would take my house as if it were his right. I recalled the years of manipulation, the forged signatures, the embezzled money. Shall we do this? I decided, but with one condition. I want it to be filmed live. I want them to be caught off guard, with no chance to prepare excuses. Teresa smiled, approving the idea. We can hide the crew in cameras. We'll only reveal them at the right moment. On Thursday, I did something I had never done before. I visited a lawyer to modify my will. Following Dr. Gomez's advice, I created a foundation in my name, the Olivia Noguera Foundation for Elder Protection, and officially transferred ownership of my house to this foundation, with the condition that I could continue living in it for the rest of my life. This ensures that your son cannot sell the house. Even if he ever manages to get you to sign a document under pressure, Dr. Gomez explained. The house now belongs to the foundation, no longer to you. But won't this ruin our plan for Saturday? I asked, confused. On the contrary, he smiled. That's what makes our plan foolproof. On Friday, the eve of the big day, I prepared the house as if I were truly expecting guests. I changed the sheets in the guest room, cleaned every corner, and set up an immaculate breakfast table. I also organized small envelopes, each with the name of a member of Mauricio's family. Cecilia helped me bake a chocolate cake, my grandson Miguel's favorite, and set the table with the best tablecloth, the one I only used on special occasions. Anyone who entered my house would think I was genuinely happy about the family's arrival. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Mauricio would react, if I was doing the right thing, if it would be better to confront him privately. Then I remembered all the times I tried to talk, all the times I forgave, all the chances I gave. I recalled how he always manipulated my feelings, relying on my tendency to give in to avoid conflict. No, this time would be different. At 68, I was tired of being the woman everyone could walk all over because I never reacted. I was tired of confusing love with submission. On Saturday morning, I woke up before the sun rose. I took a long shower, chose my best outfit, a turquoise dress that Mauricio always criticized for being too flashy for a woman my age. I carefully styled my hair and even put on a bit of lipstick. At 7:30, I heard the sound of the moving truck parking on the street. Soon after, cars arrived. I looked out the kitchen window and saw the scene that Mauricio had planned so carefully. He was getting out of the car with that air of someone who rules the world. Fernanda was organizing the kids, and Donna Iracema was complaining about the heat while leaning on her cane. I took a deep breath, feeling a surprising calm wash over me. For 68 years, I had been Olivia, the mother who always gave in. Today, I would be Olivia, the woman who finally said no. The intercom buzzed. I answered with the sweetest voice I could muster. "I'll open it in a moment, dear." Before opening the gate, I glanced at the living room. Jerima was hiding in the kitchen. Dr. Gomez and his team of lawyers were waiting in the back room. Teresa and the film crew were strategically positioned. Cameras ready. Cecilia looked at me from her hiding spot in the hallway and gave me a thumbs up. I walked to the door and opened it with a serene smile. Mauricio already had his hand raised, ready to knock impatiently. "Mom, we're here. Can you open the gate for the movers to start unloading?" "Of course, dear," I replied calmly. "Let everyone in first." I prepared a special breakfast to celebrate this moment. Mauricio seemed momentarily surprised by my enthusiasm but quickly returned to his usual self-assuredness. "See, Fernanda? I told you my mom would be happy to welcome us." As they entered, I noticed Fernanda's gaze scanning my living room, already calculating which furniture would need to go to make room for hers. The kids rushed inside, eager to explore what would be their new home. Donna Iracema was the last to enter, looking at me with a mix of pity and relief. Relief at having found someone to share the burden of caring for her. "Please, everyone, have a seat," I invited, gesturing to the abundant table I had prepared. "We have a lot to talk about." Once everyone was settled, with Miguel already diving into the chocolate cake and Isabella shyly holding her glass of milk, I handed out the envelopes. "Before we start this new chapter, I have a gift for each of you." It was at that moment that I began to taste the sweet flavor of true freedom. A freedom that took me 68 years to achieve, but that was finally mine. I handed out the envelopes one by one, closely observing each person's expressions. Mauricio received his with that confident smile of his, as if any gift from his mother was his by right. Fernanda looked impatient, probably already thinking about how she would reorganize my cabinets once we finished this ritual she clearly deemed unnecessary. Donna Iracema accepted her envelope with trembling hands, genuinely surprised by the gesture. "Please, open them," I gently urged, pouring more coffee to mask the tremor in my hands. I will never forget the exact moment Mauricio opened his envelope. First, confusion spread across his face. Then, as he read the document, his eyes widened and all the color drained from his cheeks. It was like watching a sandcastle crumble before a giant wave. "Mom, what is this?" His voice came out strangled, unrecognizable. "Something I should have done a long time ago, son." Inside Mauricio's envelope were copies of all the loan contracts he had taken out in my name, along with an expert report confirming the forgery of the signatures. There was also a formal notice demanding immediate payment of all misappropriated funds, threatening criminal prosecution. Fernanda, who had not yet opened her envelope, looked at her husband with concern. "What's wrong, love? You look pale." "I think you should open yours too, Fernanda," I suggested while serving a piece of cake to Miguel, who was watching everything with curious eyes. Fernanda hurriedly tore open the envelope. Her face shifted from worry to absolute shock in seconds. Inside her envelope were prints of WhatsApp conversations between her and Augusto, Mauricio's partner, with whom she had been having an affair for months. They discussed how they would use my house as collateral to start their own business, leaving Mauricio out of it. "How? How could you?" she stammered, looking around as if searching for hidden cameras. "Grandma, what's happening?" asked Marina, my oldest granddaughter, the only one who seemed to sense the growing tension in the room. It was then I realized Marina hadn't opened her envelope. Unlike the adults, the kids were more interested in the chocolate cake than in papers. I smiled at her with genuine affection. "Open your envelope, dear. Yours is special." Marina complied, carefully opening the envelope without tearing it. Her eyes sparkled as she saw the contents. "Grandma, is this true?" Inside Marina's and her brother Miguel's envelopes were colorful cards with a loving message and documents for 2 savings accounts opened in their names, each with an initial deposit of 5,000 reis. "For your future," I had written on the cards, "because true love cares for the well-being of others." It was at that moment that Dona Iracema finally opened her envelope with trembling fingers due to arthritis. Unlike the others, she showed no shock, only deep sadness. Her envelope contained bank statements, showing how her son, Fernanda's brother, had been siphoning money from her account for years, explaining why her savings had mysteriously vanished. "I suspected," she murmured so softly I could barely hear, but she didn't want to believe it. Mauricio abruptly stood up, knocking over his chair. "What nonsense is this, Mom? Where did you get these lies?" "Lies, Mauricio." I kept my voice calm. Years of practice in hiding emotions were finally serving a useful purpose. "You know very well that all of this is true. Every loan, every forged signature, every cent you took from me without my consent. You can't prove any of this?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Miguel began to cry, frightened by his father's reaction. It was at that moment I gave the signal. Cecilia came out from the hallway, Jerima emerged from the kitchen, and Dr. Gomez appeared with his team of lawyers. Lastly, Teresa and her film crew revealed themselves, cameras rolling, capturing the entire scene. "Actually, son, I can prove everything," I replied, standing up as well. "And I'm not alone in this." Mauricio's face went from red with anger to white with fear in seconds. He looked at each new face in the room as if seeing ghosts. "Cecilia, what are you doing here? And who are these people?" "Mom, you brought strangers to our family discussion?" "Correction, Mauricio," Doctor intervened. Gomez in his professional tone. "This is not a family discussion. It's the documentation of a case of financial abuse against an elderly person, forgery, and fraud. Crimes with sentences ranging from 2 to 8 years in prison." Teresa approached with the microphone. "We are recording a special episode of the show Elderly at Risk, with Mrs. Olivia's permission. Would you like to share your version of the events with our viewers?" Fernanda began to cry while Mauricio appeared frozen. It was Mrs. Iracema who broke the silence, with a surprisingly firm voice for someone her age and condition. "Olivia is right," she said, discreetly wiping away a tear. You two planned this coldly. I heard you talking in the room, thinking I was asleep, discussing how you would sell this house as soon as you convinced the old lady to transfer it to your names. That revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. Even knowing everything, hearing the confirmation from Mrs. Irasima made it all feel even more real, more painful. The old lady is me, Mauricio? I asked, feeling my voice falter for the first time. The mother who washed your clothes until you were 30, who paid for your technical course by working extra hours as a seamstress, who lent you money for your wedding, even when she barely had enough for herself. Marina stood up and came to my side, holding my hand. That small gesture of solidarity gave me the strength to continue, you know? For years I thought the blame was mine. I kept looking directly into my son's eyes, believing I had raised a selfish child because I was a single mother, because I worked too much, because I didn't know how to set limits. Today I understand that's not true. You had the same opportunities as your sisters. Cecilia and Jose grew up respectful, honest, and hardworking. The difference is that you chose the easy path. You chose to use people instead of earning your own space. Mauricio finally seemed to awaken from the shock. His face twisted into a mask of anger and despair. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. Where are we going to live now? We've already handed over the apartment. Do you want to see your grandchildren on the street? It was the same old tactic. The emotional blackmail, the appeal to my guilt as a mother. But this time I was ready. No, Mauricio, I don't want to see my grandchildren on the street. That's why I opened accounts for them, to ensure they have a future even with parents and guardians like you. As for you two, I pointed at him and Fernanda, you are adults. Find solutions like adults. And what about your mother, Fernanda? I asked, turning to my daughter-in-law, who was silently sobbing in a corner. You were going to bring her to my house, knowing she was being robbed by her own son? What kind of daughter does that? Fernanda didn't answer, she just lowered her head. It was Mrs. Irasima who spoke with a dignity that surprised me. Olivia, you are absolutely right to be outraged. I didn't know the extent of their plans. I only realized something was wrong when my savings disappeared and I was told I needed to live with someone because I could no longer afford my rent. At that moment, I felt a wave of empathy for that lady. She was also a victim like me. Two elderly women whose lives were being manipulated by those who should protect us. Mrs. Irasima said, moving closer to me. You are not obligated to participate in this farce. We have a spot at the Santa Clara nursing home with daily medical care, which the foundation I created can cover until you recover your savings from your son. Her eyes filled with tears. Would you do this for me after everything my daughter planned against you? I would, because I understand your situation, because I know what it's like to be treated as a disposable object by your own children. Mauricio, seeing he was losing control of the situation, tried one last move. He approached me with that look that always worked when he was a child, head down, remorseful expression, choked voice. Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I admit it. But you can't do this to your own family. Think of your grandchildren. What will they think when they grow up and learn that their grandmother kicked them out? I looked at Miguel and Marina, who were watching everything with confused expressions. Would they be the next victims of this cycle of manipulation? Would they grow up thinking it's normal to use others for their own benefit? Your children won't grow up thinking it's okay to treat their parents as disposable objects. Mauricio, this is my gift to them. To show that respect is not optional, it's mandatory, that love doesn't mean allowing oneself to be abused. Teresa, who had been discreetly filming everything, approached with a question. Mrs. Olivia, what do you expect to happen now? I took a deep breath before answering. I hope for justice, but also redemption. I don't want my son to go to jail. I want him to understand what he did and make amends. That's when Dr. Gomez intervened again, with an envelope larger than the others. That's why we prepared this. It's an out-of-court settlement. If Mr. Mauricio and Mrs. Fernanda sign agreeing to the terms, we won't need to take the case to criminal court. What terms? Mauricio asked suspiciously. First, full repayment of all the money taken from your mother and mother-in-law. Second, community service at the Olivia Noguera Foundation for the protection of the elderly for a minimum of 2 years. Third, mandatory participation in family therapy to rebuild broken ties. And fourth, obviously, you will find another place to live. Fernanda, who until then seemed paralyzed by shock, finally found her voice. And what if we don't sign? Then, the footage we are recording, along with all the documentation of the crimes committed, will be handed over to the public prosecutor's office today. The silence that followed was almost palpable. I saw in my son's eyes something I had never seen before. Not just anger or frustration, but a slow, painful understanding that, for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be able to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Would you really do this, Mom? Would you report me to the police? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. I looked at that 42-year-old man and, for a moment, saw the boy I once held in my arms. The boy I swore to protect from everything and everyone. The boy who became a man who wouldn't hesitate to leave me on the street if it brought him some benefit. I don't want to do this, Mauricio. I never wanted to, but you left me no choice. Cecilia, who had been silently observing everything, approached her brother. Mauricio, accept the deal. It's more than you deserve. Mom is still being generous after everything you've done. Generous? He retorted bitterly. She's leaving us homeless, with 2 kids. And you were going to leave her without a home? Cecilia replied firmly. The difference is that she is 68 years old and you are 42. She raised 3 children on her own at the age you are now, without complaining, without dragging anyone down. Gradually, I saw Mauricio's resistance fade away. His shoulders slumped, defeated. Fernanda, realizing there was no way out, was the first to give in. Let's sign, she said, surprising everyone. We have no choice. As Dr. Gomez prepared the documents for signing, Marina approached me again. That 12-year-old girl seemed to be the only one truly aware of the gravity of the moment. Grandma, she whispered. I knew something was wrong. I heard Mom and Dad arguing about money, about your house. I tried to talk to them, but no one listened to me. I hugged my granddaughter, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. Some people only learn the hard way, dear. But you are different, you have a good heart. Can I still visit you, even without them? Always, my love. This house will always be open to you and your brother. After the documents were signed, it was established that Mauricio and his family would have 48 hours to find a temporary place. Donna Iracema accepted the offer of the nursing home with tears of gratitude in her eyes. Teresa finished the recording, promising that the program would be edited responsibly, focusing more on raising awareness about financial abuse against the elderly than on the specific family drama. When everyone finally left, Mauricio and Fernanda in mortified silence, the children confused but relieved that the tension was over, the film crew carrying their equipment, I was left alone with Cecilia, Jerima, and Dr. Gomez in the room that continued to be mine. We did it, sighed Cecilia, hugging me. I don't know if we did is the right phrase, I replied, feeling the exhaustion of decades finally hit me. No one really wins in a situation like this. You gained your freedom, Olivia, Jerima said, holding my hand. And maybe, just maybe, your son has gained a chance to become a better person. Dr. Gomez, always practical, began to gather the scattered documents. The foundation is officially registered. The house is protected. And now, Mrs. Olivia? What do you plan to do with this new phase of your life? I looked out the window, seeing the moving truck leave empty, taking away not just furniture that never made it in, but also a weight I had carried for decades, the weight of always being the last priority in my own life. Now, I replied with a tired but genuine smile, I will finally live for myself. It was at that moment I realized that my allies, Cecilia, Jerima, Dr. Gomez, were not there just because of that specific situation. They had always been by my side, patiently waiting for me to find my own voice. And finally, at 68, I had found it. It was at that moment I realized that my allies, Cecilia, Jerima, Dr. Gomez, were not there just because of that specific situation. They had always been by my side, patiently waiting for me to find my own voice. And finally, at 68, I had found it. The Saturday that was supposed to mark the beginning of the invasion of my home became the first day of my true independence. When the last car left and I closed the door, a comforting silence filled the space. My house remained my home. My space remained my space. "I think we all deserve a strong coffee," Cecilia said, already heading to the kitchen, "or maybe something stronger. There's that jambu cachaca Jose sent you from Recife, right, Mom?" She smiled, feeling the exhaustion and adrenaline mix in my body. "I think the occasion calls for it." The four of us sat on the back porch, that little corner overlooking my small herb garden. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the pitana tree, creating patterns of light on the ceramic floor. Jerima poured the cachaca into small glasses, and we made a silent toast, each lost in our own thoughts. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Olivia?" Dr. Gomez asked after the first sip. I took a moment to respond. How was I feeling? Relieved? Yes, triumphant, perhaps. But there was something more, something I couldn't name right away. "I'm feeling real," I finally replied, as if my whole life I had been a secondary character and now I had finally become the protagonist. Jerima nodded, understanding perfectly. "Many of us have spent our whole lives like that, Olivia, supporting characters in other people's stories, especially us women of this generation. The important thing," Cecilia added, "is that it's never too late to change the script." Dr. Gomez checked his watch and stood up. "I need to go to the registry office to make sure everything is in order with the foundation's paperwork, but I'll be back later to ensure there are no surprises." After he left, Cecilia hugged me tightly. "Mom, I'm so proud of you, so proud I can hardly express it." Those simple words brought tears to my eyes. How many times had I said the same thing to my children? How many times had I expressed pride in their achievements, big or small, but no one had ever said that to me. No one had ever recognized my daily struggles, my small victories against adversity. "Thank you, daughter," I whispered, discreetly wiping away a stubborn tear. Without you all, I wouldn't have made it." "You would have," Jerima replied firmly. "It might have taken longer. It might have been harder, but you would have gotten there because deep down you always knew your worth, Olivia. You just needed to believe in it." The rest of that day passed in a mix of calm and anticipation. Part of me still waited for Mauricio to come back at any moment, shouting, demanding, trying to regain control, but the phone stayed silent and no one knocked on the door. On Sunday morning, I woke up to the sound of birds singing. For a moment, before opening my eyes, I thought it had all been an elaborate dream, the confrontation, the documents, the cameras. But then I smelled fresh coffee and heard Cecilia singing in the kitchen. "Good morning, warrior." She smiled as I walked in, still in my pajamas. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," I replied, realizing it was true. I hadn't had nightmares or woken up in the middle of the night, worried about bills, the future, or what others would think of me. We had coffee together, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. Like a mother and daughter rediscovering the joy of each other's company. That's when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be Mauricio? Had he come back to try another tactic? But when I opened the door, there were Marina and Miguel, accompanied by a man I didn't know. "Grandma." Miguel ran to hug me, as if nothing had happened the day before. For him, at just 7 years old, the drama was merely a confusing argument between adults. Marina, more perceptive at 12, hugged me more gently, whispering an apology that nearly broke my heart. The man introduced himself as Paulo, Fernanda's brother. "Mrs. Olivia, I brought the kids to visit you, if it's not a bother. Mauricio and Fernanda are staying at my house temporarily, and I thought it would be good for the little ones to keep in touch with you." I invited them in, noticing that Paulo seemed genuinely embarrassed by the whole situation. As the kids ran to the kitchen, drawn by the smell of fresh cake, he explained that he only learned of his sister's plans the night before, when they showed up at his door in a panic. I was horrified, he confessed. I've always had a lot of respect for you, and knowing my own sister was involved in something like this, well, it's hard to accept. Sometimes the people we love disappoint us, Mr. Paulo, I replied firmly. That doesn't mean we should stop loving them, it just means we need to set clear boundaries. He nodded, looking relieved by my understanding. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I made it clear to Fernanda and Mauricio that they can stay at my place for 2 weeks. No more. Enough time to find a place or sort things out with you. There's nothing to sort out, I responded firmly. The agreement has already been signed. They need to move on as the responsible adults they should be. Paulo didn't argue. Instead, he changed the subject, asking about my newly established foundation. As we talked, I watched Marina with Cecilia in the kitchen. There was an instant connection between aunt and niece, something that gave me hope for the future. Maybe not everything was lost. When Paulo and the kids left, I promised Miguel and Marina they would always be welcome in my home. Grandma loves you, no matter what happens, I said, hugging them at the door. In the days that followed, a strange calm settled in. I hadn't heard directly from Mauricio or Fernanda, just occasional updates through Paulo or Dr. Gomez, who was monitoring the agreement. I learned they had rented a smaller apartment, that Fernanda had reconnected with an old college friend who offered her a job at her nutrition clinic, and that Mauricio was reluctantly starting his volunteer hours at the foundation. A week after the confrontation, Teresa called to inform me that the program edit was ready, but I had the right to watch it before airing and request changes if necessary. I don't want you to feel exposed, she explained. The goal is to raise awareness about financial abuse against the elderly, not to create a spectacle out of your family drama. The next morning, Teresa showed up with a laptop to present the final edit. Cecilia, Jerima, Dr. Gomez, and I sat in the living room, looking at the small screen where my story unfolded. It was surreal to see myself in that situation, the determination on my face contrasting with the shock and then defeat in Mauricio's eyes. What did you think? Teresa asked as the final credits rolled. It's strange, I confessed. Like watching a movie where you're the main character, but at the same time, you don't fully recognize yourself. This happens because you are seeing yourself through the eyes of others for the first time, Jerima explained. No longer through your own critical and self-deprecating eyes. Teresa took some notes. Should I understand that there are no objections to the broadcast? I looked at Cecilia, who felt encouragingly. No objections. If my story can help others in the same situation, it will be comforting to know that I went through all of this for a greater purpose. The program aired on a Tuesday night. I didn't have the courage to watch it again, preferring to keep myself busy in the garden, planting rosemary seedlings that SCU Antonio from the market had given me. When I finally went inside, there were 12 missed calls on my cell phone, some from unknown numbers, others from old friends who had recognized my story. The response was greater than I could have imagined. In the following days, I received supportive messages from people sharing similar stories, from seniors who felt inspired to seek help. Dr. Gomez informed me that inquiries about elderly rights had tripled in his office. You have become a symbol, Mrs. Olivia, he said with evident admiration. A symbol of resistance against family abuse. I didn't feel like a symbol, nor a heroine, just a 68-year-old woman who had finally learned to say no. 2 weeks after the broadcast, I received an unexpected call. It was from the BOM Retiro Cultural Center, inviting me to give a talk about my experience. At first, I declined, terrified at the idea of speaking in public, but Cecilia and Jerima insisted that I should consider it. Think of how many Olivias are out there, Mom, Cecilia argued. Women who spent their whole lives serving others and now in old age are treated like burdens. I ended up accepting more out of their insistence than my own conviction. I spent days preparing a short speech, practicing in front of the mirror, trying to tame the nervousness that consumed me. On the night of the talk, the small auditorium at the Cultural Center was packed. To my surprise, it wasn't just seniors. There were people of all ages, including young ones who could be my grandchildren. "Good evening," I began with a trembling voice. "My name is Olivia Noguera. I'm 68 years old, and for almost my entire life, I believed that loving meant giving myself up." As I spoke, my voice gained strength. I shared about my childhood in Recife, about moving to Sao Paulo, about the struggle to raise 3 children alone after my husband's death. I talked about the small daily sacrifices that added up to the gradual erasure of my identity. When my son announced he was moving into my house with his family without even asking if I agreed, I realized I had created a monster, I confessed. Not a monster in the literal sense, but an adult who had learned that my needs, my desires, my rights were secondary to his. I recounted the investigation, the plan, the confrontation, omitting more intimate details or anything that could directly identify my family. I spoke about the foundation, about the importance of setting boundaries, about how it's never too late to start over. At 68, I am learning to live for myself. I am learning that saying no doesn't mean I love less, it means I am finally including myself in that love. When I finished, there was a moment of absolute silence, followed by a wave of applause that left me breathless. People came to hug me, share stories, and ask for advice. An elderly lady, nearly 80, held my hands between hers and said with tears in her eyes, "You gave me the courage to do what I've needed to do for years." I returned home exhausted, but with a sense of purpose I had never felt before. Cecilia, who had been quietly watching from the back of the auditorium, embraced me with pride. "You were magnificent, Mom. Absolutely magnificent." In the following weeks, my routine took on new shapes. Mornings were still dedicated to the garden and the sewing I did for pleasure, no longer out of necessity. But afternoons were now filled with foundation activities, meetings with Dr. Gomez about legal aspects, visits to the nursing home, where Dona Iracema was surprisingly adapting well, and occasional interviews for local newspapers interested in the initiative. It was during one of those visits to the nursing home that I had an unexpected reunion. I was talking to the administrator about possible improvements to the facilities when I saw Mauricio in the garden helping some elderly people with a community garden. Part of his volunteer work, I imagined. Our eyes met briefly. There was no wave or smile, just a silent acknowledgement of each other's presence. I continued my conversation as if I hadn't seen him, but my heart raced in my chest. As I was leaving, he appeared in the parking lot. He looked worn out but thin, with deep dark circles that revealed sleepless nights. "Mom," he said simply as a greeting. "Mauricio," I replied in the same tone. We stood in uncomfortable silence for a few seconds until he finally spoke. "I'm doing the volunteer hours, as we agreed. I've got a new job, too, starting next week." "I'm happy for you," I replied. And it was true. Despite everything, he was still my son. "The kids ask about you. Miguel, especially. They can visit me whenever they want. You know that." More silence. Mauricio seemed to struggle with words he couldn't express. "I need to go," I finally said, indicating my car. "Mom," he called as I was opening the door. "I've been thinking a lot about everything I've done." I waited without showing any reaction. I guess I never realized, never truly understood how much what, Mauricio, how much I took you for granted, as if you existed only to serve my needs. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. "I'm in therapy," he continued. "It was Fernanda's idea, actually. We're both doing it." "That's good," I commented neutrally. "Yeah, it's strange. Every time the therapist asks about my childhood, about how our relationship was, I start talking about how you were always there for me, how I never lacked anything. And then I realize I'm talking about you as a service, not as a person." That realization from him hit me deeply. It was exactly how I had felt for years. A service, a function, not a person with their own desires and needs. "Well," I said, unable to articulate everything that was going through my mind. "Maybe it's a start. Can I call you one of these days to talk more?" I nodded slightly. "You can." But, Mauricio, okay? This time ask first. Don't assume. Never assume anything about me or my availability again. He lowered his head like a reprimanded child. I understood. I got into the car and drove home with a strange sense of closure. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe never completely, but it was a start, a small step towards something new, a relationship that, if ever rebuilt, would be based on mutual respect, not one-sided expectations. When I got home, I found Jurema on the porch, waiting for me with 2 cups of tea. How was it? She asked, already handing me a cup. I met Mauricio, I replied, sitting down beside her. And how was it? I paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. It was a beginning, I finally answered. A beginning of something I still can't define. Jurema nodded, understanding as always. Beginnings are important, Olivia, especially at 68, when many people think there's nothing new to start. I looked at my little garden, at the rosemary seedlings I had recently planted, at the sky starting to glow with the orange hues of sunset. There was so much beauty in the world, so much to experience, to feel. And now, finally, I had the freedom to live it all on my own terms. You know what, Jurema? I said, smiling at my friend. I think I'm just getting started. You know what, Jurema? I said, smiling at my friend. I think I'm just getting started. And I truly was. In the months that followed that meeting with Mauricio, my life gained colors I never thought possible at 68. The Olivia Noguera Foundation for Elderly Protection grew beyond my wildest expectations. What started as a strategy to protect my home transformed into a mission that gave new meaning to my existence. Dr. Gomez, with his legal expertise, helped structure a department for free legal assistance for elderly victims of financial or property abuse. Jurema, with her boundless energy, organized a support group that met weekly at the municipal library. And I, to my own surprise, discovered a talent for public speaking that I never knew I had. You have the gift of authentic communication, Teresa told me after a particularly moving talk at the Cultural Center. You speak from the heart, without pretense. People feel that. It was strange to hear compliments, even stranger to believe them. After decades of putting myself second, I was still learning to accept recognition without discomfort, to take up space without apologizing for existing. One afternoon, while tidying up my sewing studio, now transformed into a small office for the Foundation's matters, I found an old box at the back of the closet. Inside was a recipe book that had belonged to my mother, an old photo album, and, to my surprise, a yellowed envelope with my name written in the elegant handwriting of Antonio, my late husband. My heart racing, I opened the envelope. It was a letter dated 2 days before his sudden heart attack, nearly 30 years ago. My dear Olivia, the letter began. If you are reading this, it's because something has happened to me. I hope not. I hope this letter remains forgotten in some drawer and that we grow old together as we always dreamed. But if fate decides otherwise, I need you to know some things I may not have said enough. I sat in the nearest chair, feeling my legs weaken. In all these years, I had never found that letter. How did it end up in that box? Who put it there? You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Antonio continued in his letter. Stronger than you think, more capable than you believe. I know that if something happens to me, you will move on. You will raise our children with the same love and dedication you have always shown. But I have one request, just one request. Don't lose yourself in the process. Don't let your light fade while you illuminate the path for others. Tears blurred my vision, making it hard to keep reading. It felt like Antonio was there, speaking directly to me across time, predicting exactly what would happen. Remember the girl from Recife I met with dreams in her eyes and determination in her heart? The one who wanted to see the world, learn new things, live intensely. She is still there, Olivia. Don't let her disappear. Those words hit me like lightning. Antonio had seen something I had forgotten over the years. The dreamer from Recife who came to Sao Paulo, full of hopes and plans. The young woman who, before becoming a mother, before being a widow, before being a seamstress, was simply Olivia, with her own desires and ambitions. I wiped my tears and kept reading. I don't know what the future holds for you and our children, but I know you have enough strength to face any challenge. Just don't forget to save some of that strength for yourself. Love yourself, Olivia, with the same unconditional love you give to others. It's my last request, my final prayer. The letter ended with "I will love you forever, Antonio." And a small note, P.S. That trip to the Northeast we always postponed, take it. Go back to your roots, rediscover yourself. I sat there, reading the letter over and over, letting Antonio's words cross decades to touch my heart. How had he predicted so precisely what would happen? How did he know I would lose myself in the role of mother and provider, completely forgetting who I was? I carefully stored the letter and continued organizing the studio, but my mind was buzzing with thoughts and possibilities. The mention of the trip to the Northeast awakened something dormant in me, an old, almost forgotten desire to revisit my origins, to show Recife to Antonio, to introduce him to the cousins and uncles still living there. A trip that never happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Antonio's words echoed in my mind, mixing with everything that had happened in the last few months. The confrontation with Mauricio, the creation of the foundation, the lectures, the slow process of rediscovering my own identity. In the morning, I called Cecilia. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something. Did you know about this letter your father left for me?" A silence on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. "Yes, Mom. I found it a few years ago when I helped you organize the closet in your room. But you were so busy back then, dealing with the bathroom renovation, worried about Luciana's wedding? I thought it was best to keep it for a moment when you could really absorb what Dad wrote." "And why now? Why put it in that box just now?" "Because now you're ready, Mom. Ready to hear what Dad wanted to say, ready to be Olivia again. Not just someone's mother, someone's grandmother, the neighborhood seamstress." I fell silent, processing that revelation. My own daughter had waited years for the right moment, keeping Antonio's last words like a precious treasure that should only be revealed when I could truly appreciate them. "Thank you, my daughter," I whispered, my voice choked. "Thank you for knowing me so well." Then, she continued with a lighter tone. "What are you going to do now?" About Dad's suggestion, the trip, something ignited within me. A small but persistent flame of possibilities and adventures. "I think it's time to visit Jose in Recife," I replied, surprising myself with the sudden decision. Meeting my grandchildren in person, revisiting my hometown. "Mom, that sounds wonderful. Do you want me to go with you? I can take a few days off from the hospital." "No, my daughter. I think I need to do this alone, or rather, not completely alone. I'll invite Jerima. That stubborn old friend has never left Sao Paulo. It's high time she saw the rest of Brazil." Jerima, as expected, accepted the invitation immediately with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Olivia Nogueira, I thought you'd never invite me. I'm packing my bags right now." We spent the following weeks organizing the trip, buying tickets, contacting Jose to finalize the details. My middle son was thrilled with the news, promising to show us every corner of Recife, take us to Porto de Galinhas, Olinda, the mangroves, and beaches that were part of my distant childhood. 2 weeks before the trip, I received an unexpected call. It was Mauricio. "Mom, I heard you're going to Recife," he said without preamble. "How did you know?" I asked, surprised. I hadn't mentioned my plans to him. "Marina told me." She spoke with Aunt Cecilia. "Of course. The family grapevine, always efficient." "Yes. I'm going to visit your brother, meet my grandchildren in person." There was a silence on the other end of the line, as if Mauricio was gathering the courage to say something difficult. "Can I take you to the airport, me and the kids?" The request caught me off guard. Since our brief meeting at the nursing home, Mauricio had kept his distance, occasionally calling to give updates about the kids, but never suggesting a meeting. "Sure," I replied after a moment. That would be nice, Mom. He continued, his voice hesitant. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how I was, how I treated you, Mauricio. We don't need to, Mom. We do need to. He interrupted me with a firmness that wasn't aggressive, just determined. I need to say this. I spent my whole life thinking you existed to solve my problems, to make my path easier. I never saw you as a complete person, with your own desires and needs. I fell silent, unsure how to respond. Therapy is helping. He continued. I'm learning to see things differently, to understand how my behavior affected you and everyone around me. I'm happy for you, son. I replied sincerely. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mom. Not yet. I know what I did goes far beyond a quick apology. I'm working on it one day at a time. That maturity, so different from the Mauricio I knew, took me by surprise. Perhaps the confrontation had been a turning point, not just for me, but for him as well. Time heals many things, Mauricio, and we are both learning to build a different relationship. That's all I ask, Mom, a chance to build something new. When I hung up, I found myself thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. If someone had told me a few months ago that Mauricio would be in therapy, acknowledging his mistakes and asking for a second chance, I would have been in disbelief. But there he was, seemingly starting his own transformation process. The day of the trip arrived faster than I expected. Mauricio, true to his word, showed up with Miguel and Marina to take me to the airport. Jerima was already there with her 3 giant suitcases that matched her larger-than-life personality. Grandma, will you bring me seashells from the beach? Miguel asked, hugging my legs. Of course, my love. And what about you, Marina? What do you want me to bring from Recife? My oldest granddaughter thought for a moment, then replied with a seriousness beyond her years. Bring stories, Grandma. Stories from when you were a girl there. I hugged her, moved by the sensitivity of that child. I'll bring the best stories, I promise. When it was time to board, Mauricio surprised me with an awkward but sincere hug. Have a good trip, Mom. Enjoy yourself, you deserve it. On the plane, sitting next to Jerima, who wouldn't stop talking about all the food she wanted to try, I finally allowed myself to relax completely for the first time in decades. There were no worries about home, the kids, or money. Just the anticipation of reconnecting with my roots, fulfilling Antonio's last request. Recife welcomed me with its characteristic warmth, humid and enveloping. Jose was at the airport with his wife Mariana and their 2 kids, Pedro, 15, and Clara, 12. It was strange and wonderful to hug those kids I only knew through video calls, to feel their warmth, to hear their voices without the distortion of the internet. Mom, you look great. Jose exclaimed, hugging me tightly. You look younger, more radiant. That's what happens when we let go of burdens we've carried for too long, I replied, exchanging a knowing glance with Jerima. The 10 days in Recife felt like a dream. Jose, always the calm and organized son, had planned the perfect itinerary. We visited Marco Zero, the street of Bom Jesus, the warehouses at Cais do Porto transformed into a cultural center. We took a boat ride through the rivers that cut through the city, observing the mangroves and their crabs. We spent an entire day in Olinda, with its steep hills and Baroque churches. But the most special moment was when I returned to the fishing village where I was born, a small town an hour from the capital. The colorful houses by the sea, the smell of fresh fish, the sound of waves crashing on the sand, all of it instantly transported me back to my childhood. Do you recognize that blue house, Mom? Jose asked, pointing to a simple but well-kept building. Of course, that was my Aunt Josefa's house. I spent summers there as a child. To my surprise, Jose smiled mysteriously and handed me a key. It's ours now, or rather, yours. I bought it 2 years ago when it was put up for sale. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. I was speechless, looking from the key to the house, from the house to my son. But why? Because you always spoke about that house with such affection in your stories. Because you deserved a piece of your memories back, Because I wanted you to have a place to call your own here in Recife, to visit whenever you want. I entered the small house with my heart racing. Jose had kept the original structure, only modernizing what was necessary: plumbing, electricity, windows. But the essence remained the same. The hydraulic tile floor, the thick walls that kept the interior cool even on the hottest days, the porch facing the sea. On the living room wall, framed, was Antonio's letter. "How?" I asked, touching the frame with trembling hands. "Cecilia sent me a copy. I thought I should be here to welcome you." I sat in the old rocking chair on the porch, gazing at the endless sea before me. The waves came and went in a constant, ancient rhythm. How many waves had crashed on that beach since I left Recife? A young girl of 18, full of dreams. How many high and low tides? How many sunrises and sunsets? I closed my eyes, feeling the salty breeze on my face, listening to the sound of the waves mixed with the laughter of Jerima and Jose, chatting animatedly inside the house. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep and genuine peace. It wasn't the end of my story, far from it. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I wasn't defined solely by my roles as a mother, grandmother, seamstress, widow. A chapter where I could simply be Olivia, the girl from Recife, who never truly disappeared, just slept for a while. When I returned to Sao Paulo, with the promise of going back to Recife regularly, I found a surprise waiting for me. The foundation had been invited to participate in a national project raising awareness about the rights of the elderly. My story would be included in an educational booklet distributed across the country. "Your courage will inspire thousands, Mrs. Olivia," Dr. Gomez said, showing me the official invitation. I accepted, of course. How could I refuse the chance to turn my pain into hope for others? Today, at 69, I split my time between Sao Paulo and Recife, between the foundation and my seaside home, between lectures and long walks on the beach, between the grandchildren who come to visit and the new friends I've made. Mauricio and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship, one step at a time. It's not perfect, it's not easy, but it's real, based on mutual respect, not unilateral expectations. Marina and Miguel spend a weekend a month with me, and those are the days I look forward to the most. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I sit on the porch of my home in Bom Retiro and think back to the day my son arrived announcing he would take my place without even consulting me. In that moment, I felt only despair and indignation. I didn't know that would be the catalyst for the greatest transformation of my life. I don't know what the future holds. No one knows. But I've learned that it's never too late to start over. To rediscover who we are beyond the roles we take on. To say no when necessary, and yes to the adventures life still has to offer. And if there's one lesson I want to share with you, the one reading my story, it's this: don't wait until you're 68 to realize that your life is yours. Don't let others define your worth, your space, your rights. Respect starts from within. When we value ourselves, we teach others how to treat us. The house my son wanted to take is still mine, but now it's so much more than a physical space. It's a symbol of my reclaimed freedom, of my rediscovered identity. It's the home of a woman who finally learned that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. And at 69, I'm just starting to live. Looking back at this journey I've shared with you, I realize how a simple decision to say no completely changed the course of my life. It all began that Tuesday when my son Mauricio walked through the door of my home in Bom Retiro here in Sao Paulo and simply announced that he, his wife, their 2 kids, and his mother-in-law were moving in with me. It wasn't a request, it was a statement. As if at 68, after a lifetime of working to carve out my own space, I had no right to an opinion. For decades, I believed being a good mother meant always giving in, always putting others' needs above my own. I confused love with servitude, availability with self-neglect. When I came from Recife to Sao Paulo, young and full of dreams, I never imagined I'd find myself in such a situation. When I lost my husband Antonio and became a single mother of 3, I didn't have time to grieve. I had to work, support the family, keep everything running. What I didn't realize over all those years was how this exclusive dedication to others slowly erased who I was. The dreamer girl from Recife turned into the neighborhood seamstress, the mother of Mauricio, Cecilia, and Jose, the grandmother of Miguel and Marina. Olivia, the person, had disappeared behind these roles. Then came that announcement, the last straw, and something inside me, something that had been dormant for decades, finally awakened with the help of my friend Jerima, Dr. Gomez, whom I thought was just the owner of the Quitanda, but turned out to be a renowned lawyer, and my daughter Cecilia. I prepared a response worthy of the invasion my son planned. When they arrived on Saturday, the moving truck parked in front of my house, bags ready, furniture to unload, I welcomed them with coffee and cakes and with envelopes. Envelopes containing the truth they tried to hide, the fraudulent loans Mauricio had taken out in my name, the compromising conversations between Fernanda and her lover, the documents showing how Fernanda's brother was stealing from Dona Iracima's savings. The confrontation wasn't easy. Seeing the shock, the anger, and then the defeat in my son's eyes didn't bring joy, just a bittersweet sense of justice. It wasn't about revenge, it was about setting boundaries that should have been established long ago. That day marked the beginning of my liberation. The creation of the Olivia Noguera Foundation for the Protection of the Elderly was not just a legal strategy to protect my home, but it became a mission that gave new meaning to my life, the lectures, the support groups, the television program. All of this allowed me to turn my painful experience into help for others going through the same. Rediscovering the letter Antonio left before he died was another transformative moment. How did he manage to foresee 30 years before exactly what would happen to me? How did he know I would lose myself in the role of mother and provider, completely forgetting who I was? Don't lose yourself in the process, he wrote. Don't let your light go out while lighting the way for others. Words that crossed decades to reach me, just when I needed to hear them the most. The trip to Recife, the land of my childhood, closed an important chapter. Reconnecting with my roots, embracing my grandchildren whom I only knew through video calls, receiving the incredible surprise of the house by the shore that Jose had bought for me. All of this felt like a rebirth. I felt connected again to that girl from Recife, that young woman full of dreams that I once was. The process of reconciliation with Mauricio has been slow, as it should be. Decades of problematic behavior don't get fixed overnight, but there's hope in the small changes, in the therapy he's doing, in how he's slowly starting to see me as a whole person, not just a function in his life. Today, at 69, I split my time between Sao Paulo and Recife, between the foundation and my little house by the shore, between lectures and long walks on the beach. I've discovered that it's never too late to start over, to rediscover who we are beyond the roles we take on, to say no when necessary and yes to the adventures that life still has to offer. If you're watching me and relate to any part of my story, know that you're not alone. Thousands of people, especially women of my generation, have spent their whole lives putting others first. They were taught that self-sacrifice is a virtue, that their needs are secondary, that their dreams can wait for a later that often never comes. I want to tell you, looking directly into your eyes, don't wait until you're 68 like I did, to realize that your life is yours. Don't let others define your worth, your space, your rights. Respect starts from within. When we value ourselves, we teach others how to treat us. This channel was created to share stories like mine, stories of people who, even late in life, found the courage to change the script of their lives. If this narrative touched your heart, please leave your comment below. I would love to know what you would do in my place. Would you have acted like me? Would you have been tougher or softer? Your comments fuel our work. Also, click like so that more people can discover these stories of overcoming and transformation. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, hit the subscribe button and activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video is published. The work we do requires a lot of dedication and resources. We record, edit, and publish real stories daily, aiming to bring content that inspires and transforms lives. If you value this work and are able, consider helping us through Value Demais, a way to donate that allows us to keep bringing these stories to you. Your contribution, even a small one, makes all the difference in keeping the channel active and providing quality content. I remember when I started recording these accounts, I never imagined the impact they would have. Every message from you, every story shared in the comments, every thank you shows me that it was worth opening my heart and exposing such personal and painful situations. That's priceless. In the next video, I'll bring another impactful story that will surely touch your heart. Stay tuned so you don't miss it. And always remember, it's never too late to start over, to rediscover yourself, to say no when necessary and yes to the life you deserve to live. This is Olivia, 69 years old, sharing with you not just a story, but a lesson I took a lifetime to learn. Self-love is not selfishness, it's the foundation for truly healthy relationships. Until the next video, and thank you so much for joining me on this journey.